We're in the Gemara on Daf Samach Daled Amud Aleph, towards the top of the Amud. First word on the line is Makish, Rabbi Yehuda Oime Af Hatamid. We're speaking here about the halacha of Leisishchat al Chometz Dam Zivchi. Not allowed to have Chometz while you're shechting the Korban Pesach. So Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah that halacha, that Isser applies to the Korban Tamid as well. So the Gemara here brings the source for this. My time with Rabbi Yehuda, what's the reason of Rabbi Yehuda? Omalach, Rabbi Yehuda tells you, Zivchi, when it says in the Torah, Leisishchat al Chometz Dam Zivchi, Zevach HaMeyuchad Li. It's referring to a specific carbon which is designated for the Eibusher, a special carbon. Umay Nihu, what is this? Tamid. It refers to the carbon Tamid, not only to the carbon Pesach. Rashi here doesn't say anything, but some Mefarshim say that because by the carbon Tamid it says Karbani Lachmi Liishai, that's why the Gemara calls it a Zevach HaMeyuchad Li, and the Pasuk it says Zivchi refers not only to the carbon Pesach but also to the carbon Tamid. The next opinion we had in the Mishnah was Rab Shimon Oima Pesach Barba Asar V'chulu. Rab Shimon basically said 2 points. The first point he said was, on Erev Pesach, the halacha of Leisishchat al Chometz Dam Zivchi is only regarding the carbon Pesach. On any other time, during Yontif, let's say, if you're bringing the carbon Pesach or any other carbon, so then the Isser applies to all carbonas, not only the carbon Pesach. So the Gemara brings the source for this. My time with Rab Shimon. What's Rab Shimon's reason? Because this lav says in the Torah twice. Zivchi, Zivchi, Trei, Zimni. It says Leisishchat al Chometz Dam Zivchi, and then in another pasuk it says Leisizbach al Chometz Dam Zivchi. Twice. So Kri Bey, the way to read it is Zevach Zvochai. You take the Yud that it's written by one, and you add it to the other word, and then you get, in one word you have Zevach, and in the other word you get Zvochai. Zvochai in the plural means many karbanos. In other words, that this Isser applies to all karbanos that are brought during Pesach, and you have Chometz. This concept is known in other places in Shas as Goyrin, Meisifin, V'darshan. You remove a letter from one word, you add it to another word, and then you darshan that word that you now have. So over here you darshan this word as Zvochai. But now the drasha continues and explains, Lamai hilchase palgin rachmane ma'adadi. So why did the Torah separate the two yuds from each other? Why does it write a yud here and a yud here? And the Torah could just write once instead of writing twice, zivchi, zivchi, and then taking the yud and putting it on the other word. Just write once, zvachai, v'lekosav zvachai, l'meimar, to tell you that bisman the ikke zevach. When there is a zevach, meaning the carbon Pesach, loi mechayiv azvachai. So then you're not chayiv for this lav on any other carbon. On Erev Pesach, when there is the carbon Pesach, so then for any of the other carbonis, you're not going to be chayiv for Leisishchat al Chometz Dam Zivchi. Bisman the lek zevach, on the rest of Pesach, when there's no carbon Pesach that you bring, so then mechayiv azvachai. You will be chayiv on this lav for any of the other karbanos that you bring while you have chometz. So that's why the Torah wrote it twice. Once zevach is going on out of Pesach, and once zvachai is going on the entire yontiv of Pesach. U'b'mayed l'shmoi pater v'chulu. So it said in the Mishnah that on Pesach, if you bring the carbon Pesach l'shma, you're going to be pater if you add chometz. Why? Because when you bring the carbon Pesach l'shma in middle of Pesach, it's really a carbon shlamim. So you brought it l'shem Pesach, the shechita is not kosher. So therefore you'll be potter. But if you brought it shaloi l'shmai, it was a carbon Pesach, and now you brought it shaloi l'shmai, meaning for a shlamim, then it's going to be kosher. Time with the shaloi l'shmai. So what I see from the Mishnah is the only reason it's going to be kosher, and you'll be over the lav if it was brought shaloi l'shma. Hastame. But if you would just makriv this carbon Pesach in middle of Pesach, stam, without any kavanah, potter. You'll be potter. So, amai, why would you be potter? Pesach b'shayim meisashana shlomim have. It's a carbon Pesach, but it's being brought in the middle of Pesach, like any other day of the year. The halach is that it's a carbon shlomim. So shouldn't it automatically be a carbon shlomim, even if you didn't have a befedish kavanah that it should be a shlomim? It's automatically a shlomim, and if so, you should be over on the lav of Leisishchat al Chometz Dam Zivchi. So shamet mina. Shouldn't we be able to learn from here? Pesach b'shar yemois hashana Boy Akira, that Pesach on any other day of the year, the only way that you can change it from its status of being a carbon Pesach to being a carbon Shlomim is if you have a befeirische machshave that it should be for Shlomim. If you're just going to shecht it stam, it's going to remain a carbon Pesach. Rab Chia bar Gamde, so Rab Chia bar Gamde said, no, it's not necessarily a raya. Nizreka mipicha bura, the whole group of people that were there all said the same answer. Va'amru, and they said, Kogain, the case could be shahayu bailem tmei emes. The owner of this carbon were Tomei, and they couldn't bring the carbon on Erev Pesach. V'nitche and le Pesach Sheni. They were pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. The Stamei l'shon Pesach Koi. So this animal, if not for the fact that you had a befeirische kavana that it's for a Shlomim, is designated to still be brought on Pesach Sheni for the carbon Pesach. But otherwise, any carbon Pesach brought any other day of the year, automatically it's going to be a Shlomim. You don't have to have a befeirische kavana that it should be a Shlomim. Okay, now the Mishnah begins with the actual Seder of how the carbon Pesach was brought. A lot of this is what we say in the Seder carbon Pesach on Erev Pesach. Sagt the Mishnah, A Pesach nishchat b'shalosh kitos, the Pesach is shechted in 3 groups. Shenema, the Pasuk says, V'shachatu oisoi kol kahal adas Yisrael. So the Pasuk here uses 3 different expressions. Kohol, ve'eda, v'Yisrael, which means in 3 groups. According to some Rishonim, it must be 3 groups. It's ma'akiv to be dafka 3 groups. Nichnas sakata Rishayna. The first group enters. Nismalo ha'azara, and the azara was filled. Nolo dalsas ha'azara, the doors were closed. Toku ve'riu ve'toku, while they bring the carbon Pesach, they would blow with the chatzaitzris. And akayin emoimdim, shudais, from the place where the carbon was shechted, to the Mizbeach. So there were rows of kainim that would stand there, ubiyideyem, beziche kesef, ubeziche zahav, and they were holding in their hands silver bowls and gold bowls. Shura, shakula kesef, a row of kainim going to the Mizbeach that had silver bowls. They were all only silver. Vishura, shakula zahav, there was another row where they had only gold. It was all gold bowls. And lehoyamu ravim, they did not mix the gold and the silver. The Gemara will explain why. And these bowls did not have a bottom; it was pointy at the bottom. Shema yanichom, because you might put it down, v'yikra shadam, and then the blood could get congealed. So like this, they would pass it over from the place where they shechted it to the mizbeach, that it should be sprinkled on the mizbeach. Shachat Yisrael, a Yisrael shechts the carbon, v'kibalak kayin, the kayin receives the blood into a bowl. Noisnei lechavere v'chavere lechavere, he passed it from one friend to the next down the row. No, the Gemara will talk about that. Umekabel es hamale, and you receive from your friend a full bowl of blood on the way to the mizbeach. Umachzer es hareikon, and you return to him another empty bowl that was already sprinkled on the mizbeach. You return it back to him to go back to bring more blood. Hakayin hakarevetz la mizbeach, the kayin that's closest to the mizbeach, zorka zrika achas keneged yisaid, would sprinkle one zrika of this blood on the yisaid that should go down onto the yisaid of the mizbeach. Yatzas sakat rishayna, the first group left. V'nichnas sakat shniya, the second group comes in. Yatzas shniya, the second group leaves. Nichnas shlishis, the third group. Kamaisa rishayna, kachmaisa shniya vashlishis. Whatever was done the first group, the same is repeated in the second and third group. Karu es halal. While they shech the carbon and the avodah is done with the carbon, they would say halal. Who said the halal? Taisus over here brings from the Tosefta that the Leviim said halal. When you look into Rashi says karu es halal akol kitis koi. It refers to all the groups. From the simple lashon of Rashi, it's mashma that Rashi is saying that the people, the Yidden themselves, they said the halal. There's a Taisus in Sukkah that talks about this and says that when Rashi says that the Yidden read it, but it says beferish in the Tosefta that the Leviim read it. How could Rashi argue with the Tosefta? There's a famous letter from the Rebbe, 2 letters from the Rebbe, where the Rebbe discusses this barichis. The Rebbe in the Haggadah wrote on the Seder Carbon Pesach, Karus HaLeviim, Karus HaHalal. Who reads the Halal? The Leviim. So Rabbi Zevin wrote to the Rebbe, why is the Rebbe writing the Leviim? It's a machlokes. Taisva says the Leviim, and Rashi says the Kittais, the Yidden. So the Rebbe writes to him, Rashi is not arguing on the Tosefta. All Rashi means, when Rashi says Akol Kitis Koi, is that all 3 groups read, even though it's saying here in the Mishnah Karo is halal in the end, but it's going in all 3 groups. But who read the halal? The Leviim read the halal. And the Rebbe is mechiach ba'arichis that it must be that it's only the Leviim that read the halal, even according to Shittas Rashi. Sagt the Mishnah weiter, Im Gomru, if they finish saying the halal and they're still in the middle doing the Aveda, Shonu. They repeated it again. Vim Shanu, they said it already twice. Shileshu, they said it a third time. Afal pi shalei shulshu mimeim. The Aveda never took so long that in any of the groups that they said it 3 times. Rabbi Yudaima mimeim shal kat shlishis. When it came to the third group, lo yigiu lo ahafti ki yishma Hashem. They never even reached the first time to ahafti ki yishma and halal. The people that participated in the third group was very small. The way the Korban Pesach was done in the weekday, the same was done on Shabbos. Elo, there was one thing, the Kohanim would wash out the Azara, and the Chachamim were not happy with this. Rashi explains, the way they would wash out the Azara is, there was a stream that ran through the Azara, so there was lots of blood on the floor in the Azara, which was a marble floor. So they would close up, they would clog up the stream, and the water would flow over, and it would gather all the blood, and then they would open up the clog, and then they would flow out, and it would take out all the blood. So they did this on Shabbos, but the Chachamim were not happy about this. The Gemara will explain.
Outside
in the Azara, yeah, but in the Azara though.
It's an open place. It's not.
Vadanu, but there was but there was all blood all over on the Azara.
Yeah, it's not. Mashma when we say it's filled up with water.
No, outdoors. There was walls around the Azara. There was walls outside the Azara, so the water would flow over, and it would fill up, and it would gather all the blood. The Gemara will talk about it. We'll see. Sagt the Gemara weiter. Rabbi Yehuda says, Kois. They would fill up a cup of the blood that was on the floor, that was mixed from all the karbanos Pesach that were brought in that day, and they would sprinkle from that once on the Mizbeach. Chachamim did not agree to Rabbi Yehuda regarding this, that there's another zrika done from the blood on the floor.
Who did that?
I guess the Kohanim. The Kohen has to do the zrika. Yeah. Keitzad toilen umafshiten. How did they hang the animal to flay it? Unkelias shal barzel. There were metal hooks hayikvuim bakesalim that was in the walls of bamudim and poles. Shebehen toilen umafshiten. They would hang and flay the animal. Kol mi she'ein le mokim litlois lahavshit. If you didn't have a place where to hang and flay the animal, maklois dakim v'chalokim hoyushom. They had these thin rods. Maniach al you put it on your shoulder, val kasav chavere, on your friend's shoulder, v'toile umafshit, and you hang the animal there and you flay the animal. Rabbi Eliezer says, Yud dalet shechaliyas b'Shabbos, when Erev Pesach falls out in Shabbos, maniach yodoi al kasav chavere, you place your hand on your friend's shoulder, v'yad chavere al ksefoi, and your friend places his hand on your shoulder, v'toile, and you hang the animal there, umafshit, and with your other hand, you would flay the animal. Pretty talented to be able to do such a thing. Karoi, then you tear open the animal, v'hoitzi esei murov. They have to take out inside his fats that were brought in the mizbeach. Nosnei b'megis, it's placed in a basin, v'ektiran al gabi ha-mizbeach, to be brought on the mizbeach. And then the rest you have to take to roast it for the Korban Pesach. This is on Shabbos. If it's on Shabbos, so you can't take the Korban Pesach home to carry it. You can't carry it out. So they had to wait in that area until it's night. So the first group went out. Where did they wait? They would sit and wait in the Harabayis. Shniya, the second group, would wait Bachel, in the place called Chel, which is right outside the Ezras Nashim. No. This is all the Yidden. All the Yidden, they had their Korban Pesach, but they couldn't go out to carry their Korban Pesach home. You can't carry on Shabbos. So it depends. We had once about this in Eruvin and in Shabbos. If the door is open, if the door is closed, it's a good question. If the door is locked, maybe they could carry it home. But they waited there. Maybe if there's a chashash, if the door is open, I'm not sure. But they waited there, and then it came to the third group. Where did the third group wait? Vashlishis b'mekoima oimedes. They waited in their place inside the Azara. So they had to stand actually. So before it said that they were sitting, but inside the Azara you're not allowed to sit. So they had to stand there. Chashecha, when it became dark, Yotzu, they all went out. V'tzalu espes chayim. They went home and they roasted the Korban Pesach. Omer Rabbi Yitzchak, Eina Pesach nishchat ele begimel kitais. The Pesach is shechted in 3 groups. So shal shloishim b'nei yadam. The minimum of each group has to be 30 people. My time. What's the source for this? Because it says kohol ve'eda v'Yisrael. It says these 3 expressions, and we know that Eda. It says by the Meraglim, Eda is 10. So Kol and Yisrael, just like Eda, also means 10. Now Mesapkelon, there is a suffix. How we interpret this pasuk? I bevasachas. Does the Torah mean to say that there has to be 30 people at once together? I bezeh achazeh. Or does it mean 3 groups of 10 each, one after the other? So because we have this suffix, how to interpret this pasuk, so hilkach, we do both. Bi'inon shalosh kitais shal shloishim b'nei adam. So we have 3 groups of 30 people that are going to do the Korban Pesach. So like this, your yaitza, both opinions, whether it has to be 3 groups or it has to be 1 group of 30. So you have 3 groups of 30. If it all has to be 30 at once, so you have, and if it has to be 3 groups, so you have 3 groups. But we don't actually, so according to this, you would think that you actually need a total of 90 people. Each group has to be 30 people. But the Gemara says, no. But what you do is, 50 people will be enough. The Aili Tlosin, 30 people go for the first group. V'avdi, they make the Korban Pesach. Then Aili Asara, another 10 come in. V'nafki Asara, and 10 from that group come out. So you still have 30 there. So even though it's only 10 new people that are making the Korban Pesach, the 20 people that are there from before are mitzvah to them, to the group for 30. And the same thing for the last group. Aili Asara, another 10 come in. V'nafki Asara, 10 from the previous group come out. So together, all you need is 50 to be able to have 3 groups of 30. Who did?
The 20 that stayed there.
Yeah, they're just waiting to be mashlim the tziruf of Eida Kol, Eida V'Yisrael. Like by a minion. If someone davened already, he waits there.
A lot more than 90 people.
Yeah, as we'll see momentarily how many people were there. Sagt die Gemara, nichnas sakatri shayne v'cholo. Itmar Abaya Omar. Abaya says regarding the Gersa in the Mishnah, ninalu tnan. The doors were locked, meaning that it happened on its own. Rava Omar noyalin tnan. Rava says that they locked the door. My benayu, what's the difference how you read it? Ikke benayu, the difference is lemismach anisa. Could you rely on a miracle? Abaya man ninalutnan, it was locked on its own. It happened miraculously, which means kama da ailo mailo. As much people as can squeeze in the first Korban Pesach, in the first group, they all squeezed in. V'samchin and anisa, and they relied on anas for the doors to lock. Rava Amar noyalint tan. It says in the mission that they had to lock the door. V'loy samchinan anisa. You can't rely on a miracle, so you had to make sure that there should be not too many people, that the door should be able to be locked. And the similar, they had a machlokes regarding another Mishnah where it talks about this Inyan. V'hadet it says in the Mishnah, Omar Rab Yehuda. Rab Yehuda said, Chas v'sholem sha'akavye ben Mahalala nisnada. It's God forbid to say that an individual like Akavya ben Mahalalel was placed in a chayrim. It's talking over there in that Mishnah about Akavya ben Mahalalel that he said something and he was disrespectful to Shmaya and Avtalion. So in the beginning of that Mishnah it says, because he was disrespectful, he was placed in a chayrim. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it can't be that Akavya ben Mahalalel was placed in a chayrim. And he brings you about the greatness of who Akavya ben Mahalalel was. She'ein azara nenelas al koladim b'Yisrael. When the azara closes and there's all the Yidden there, so amongst them, so there's no one greater b'chachmo b'yiras chet ka Akavya ben Mahalalel. All the Yidden that are there, Akavya ben Mahalalel amongst them, he was the greatest amongst them in wisdom and in yiras chet. So it can't be that he was placed in chayrim. So now, the Gersa in the Mishnah, there's also an argument, the same exact argument. Abaye metaretz l'taimei. Abaye reads this Mishnah according to his opinion. V'Rava metaretz l'taimei. And Rava according to his opinion. Abaye metaretz l'taimei. He read the Mishnah. Ein ba'azare b'shah shenin eles al kol adam b'Yisrael b'chachme b'yiras chet ka'akavi b'malalel. When the azara is locked on its own. Over here we was going to use the word nin eles, like in our Mishnah, because like he says, it locked on its own. Rava metaretz l'tamei ein ba'azara b'shah shenoya l'noisa. In the time when you close the azara, when you lock the doors of the azara, I'll call Yisrael b'chachme b'yiras chet ka'akavi b'malalo. The same machlokes. Are we going to nin eles or are we going to noyalin? That it was locked on its own or we lock it? Tan Rabbanon. So how many people were by the Korban Pesach? So the Gemara brings a story from 1 year. First it brings, let's see. Tan Rabbanon, me'olam lo nismayach adam ba'azara. No one was ever crushed in the azara. Chutz mi Pesach echad. There was 1 year by the Korban Pesach. Shahoy b'mei Hillel. In the time of Hillel, shenismayach by zaken echad. There was one old person that got crushed. V'hayikoyrin oisei Pesach me'uchen. That year they called it the Pesach me'uchen, the Pesach where the person was crushed. Toner Rabbanon Pamachas Bikesh Agrifis Amelech Liten Einav B'Ochlese Yisrael. Agrifis Amelech wanted to take account of the population of Yidden. So when does he have all Yidden together? By the Korban Pesach. So Amalei LeKoyen Gadol 10 Einecha B'Pesachim. Pay attention by the Korban Pesach how many Yidden are here. Notal Kulye Mikol Echad. So he took a kidney from each Korban Pesach. And v'nimtza sham, and in the end, how many kolyas, how many kidneys did he have? Shishim riboy zuge kloyes, 600,000 pairs of kidneys. Kiflayim k'yetz Mitzrayim, double the amount of Yetz Mitzrayim. 1.2 million Korban Pesachs were brought that year. How they had the ability to shecht so many Korban Pesachs in one day, and in the Azara, it's tachmam shanes.
One reading of Hallel.
Yeah,
chutz. You weren't able to continue reading over?
Yeah, the Hallel Kiri, that's not the issue. There's so many karbanas to be brought in one day. Chutz mitame v'shahaya b'derech rechaika. And this is the number of Yidden that were there that year, besides those that were Tameh. Many Yidden could have been Tameh and or Derech Rechaika, too far to be able to come to make the Korban Pesach. And also, this is not the full number of how many Yidden were there. Ve'ein kol Pesach hu Pesach shalei nimnu olav yosem asara b'nei Adam. Not even one of the Korban Pesach that are brought in that year, there wasn't less than 10 people that were counted for that Korban. So it's 1.2 million Korban Pesachs times 10, at least times 10, for all the people that were for each Korban Pesach. That year, the Korban Pesach was called the thick Korban Pesach. It was a very thick crowd. 21 million? Notal frek the Gemara. So the Gemara asks on this story over here, Notal kulye, he took out the kidney to count them, but haboy yaktura, the kidney has to be brought on the Mizbeach. It's part of the parts that are burnt on the Mizbeach. And says the Gemara, the hada maktelahu. He went afterwards and brought them on the Mizbeach. Frek the Gemara, but v'hiktiroi, v'aksiv v'hiktiroi, means you have to be makriv it. For each carbon, you have to be makriv its part on the Mizbeach. What do you learn out from this? Shloi arev chalavav shalzeh bezeh. If you have different parts from different carbonates, you can't mix them. You have to be makriv each one separately. Says the Gemara, that's what he did. The hada maktelahu chada chada. He was makriv each one of the kidneys separately. But Vatanya, in another brayse it says, by the Karbanis it also says another pasuk, v'hiktiram hakayin hamizbecha. What do you learn out from this? Sheyehei kuloi ke'echad. That all the different parts of one carbon have to be brought together. You can't take out one part of that carbon separately. So Ella, what we have to say is, Tfise ba'alme, the shakal minayu, he just held on to this kulya temporarily to count, until he got something else in its place to keep the count of how many Yidden were there. But he really wasn't counting it just with the kidneys. He immediately put the kidneys back together with the other parts of the Korban Pesach to be brought on the Mizbeach. Going back to the Mishnah. They were standing in rows, and they were holding, one row was holding gold bowls, and another row was holding silver bowls. So the Gemara explains the reason for this. My time, what's the reason why it was gold is gold and silver is silver? Ileime is the reason dilme shakli de dave aili de kaspe, that maybe you're gonna take from blood with a gold bowl and give it to go get sprinkled, and instead you're going to get in return from your kayin, from another kayin, your friend, a silver bowl, and that's a problem. What's the problem if you get a silver bowl in return? So Rashi says the problem is, in Kedusha we know it says, Mailam b'kaidish ve'ein meridin. You're giving a gold bowl and you're getting back a silver bowl to go fill up the blood again, so you're going down from gold to silver. If that's the issue, hachanami dil mishakli bar mason umayli bar meya. Maybe you're going to have a gold bowl that's 200, 200 in the weight or and the value of it is 200, and you receive back a gold bowl that's less. So you're also going down. If this is an issue, just by having it all gold doesn't resolve the issue. Elamai, that can't be the reason. Ella, this is Rashi's pshat, by the way, but the Taisus Rid says that the pshat in the Gemara over here is that the Gemara is suggesting, are you going to say that we're concerned that a kohen might be a ganav? That if you're going to have the gold bowls and the silver bowls mixed in the same row, so one kohen that has a gold bowl might keep the gold bowl for himself, and bring a silver bowl instead. It's all in the same row, and you see gold, silver, you won't be able to see that he took it for himself. That's what the Gemara is asking. So the Gemara is saying, if that's the issue, so even if he has a gold bowl all in the row, have gold bowls, but still he can exchange it with a cheaper bowl, and there's still an issue. So we're not afraid that the Kainim are going to steal. So therefore, what's the reason? Zok the Gemara, it's just more beautiful to have it one row all silver, one row all gold. It's just more beautiful this way. That's why it was done this way.
Which comb goes in which one? How does it work?
2 rows. There was probably more than 2 rows. There was many rows. There was many rows from the place where they shechted to the Mizbeach. There were rows and rows, and gold, silver, yeah. He didn't have a bottom to be able to put it down. All of the bowls in the Beis Hamikdash, lehoyel and shalayim, did not have a bottom. Besides the bowls that were used for the levaina that was placed by the shulchan with the bread, shalechem upon him, shema yanicham v'yifreis halechem. Because if it doesn't have a bottom, so you're going to put it down there, you have to lean it on the lechem upon him. You're going to lean it on the lechem upon him, it might break the lechem upon him, which was made in a very unique way. It's very sensitive. You might break the lechem upon him. So that's the only bowl in the Beis Hamikdash that had a bottom. Yeah. So the Mishnah said that who shechts it? A Yisrael. Asks the Gemara, Leisagi dalav Yisrael. So is it not enough? It must be a Yisrael that shechs the carbon? Says the Gemara, no, it doesn't have to be a Yisrael, but he gufa kamash malon. This is what the Mishnah is teaching me. The shchite bizar ksheira, that it could be done with a Yisrael. And then when it says v'kibel ha'koyin ha kamash malon, that mekabala ve'elech mitzvahs kohuna, from receiving the blood, that's where it must be done by a koyin. Then the Mishnah says that the one that gets it gives it to his friend, and that's how they get it over to the Mizbeach in the row. Shamet Mina, from here you could learn Haylache, Shalei Beregel, the Aveda of Haylache, bringing it to the Mizbeach, even if you're not doing it by foot, you're just passing it over, have you Haylache. That's the Aveda of Haylache, you don't have to actually move with your feet. Says the Gemara, not necessarily. Dilme hunayit porte. Maybe each one has to move a tiny drop, a small tiny drop he moves to bring it closer to the Mizbeach. So then if that's the case, so why do we have to have all the kainim there? And each one is moving just a tiny drop. Vela mai kamash malon. So what is he telling me over here? That you have all these kainim in the row to bring it to the Mizbeach. Ha kamash malon, that beroiv am hadras melech. The avodah being done by all the kainim in these rows, bringing it to the Mizbeach, it makes it more beautiful when it's done with all these kainim. So first you give over, you receive the blood that's full, and only afterwards you give back the one that's empty. Aval ipche loy, to do it in the reverse is not appropriate. You don't first give over the empty one and then receive the full one. We see from here what Rab Shimon ben Lakish said. Ein mavirin ala mitzvahs. You have an opportunity of a mitzvah, you don't pass over a mitzvah. So you have the mitzvah to bring the blood to the Mizbeach. First you receive that blood to pass over to the Mizbeach, and only afterwards you give back the empty one. Why should you? You don't know, but he's saying the Mishnah was medayik. Dafka, this seder, that it's purposely this seder because ein mavirin ala mitzvahs. Sagt the Mishnah, Gemara weiter, Kayin HaKaravetz LaMizbeach v'chulu. The Kayin that was closest to the Mizbeach. So what did it say in the Mishnah? He was Zayrik. Zrike, he sprinkled it on the Mizbeach. Man Tane Pesach Bezrike. Who's the one that holds that by Korban Pesach the mitzvah is Zrike? So there's a machlokes about this, whether it's done with Zrike or with Shviche, or it's just poured. Zrike is you stand a little bit further away, you sprinkle it, you spray it on the Mizbeach, sort of. Shviche means you come closer and you just pour it down on the Mizbeach. So there's a machlokes about this. In our Mishnah it says Zrike. Rav Chisda, Rav Yosei Glili, the Tanya Rav Yosei Glili Yoime, as Domam Tizrak al Mizbeach, as Chalbam Takter. So it says this pasuk by a Bechor, that the blood is sprinkled on the Mizbeach. So it doesn't say Lashon Yachid, Dam Moi Loi Nema, even though it's only talking about the Bechor, it doesn't use the singular term of Dam Moi, it's blood, Ela Dam Mam. Chel Boi Loi Nema, Ela Chel Bam. So why does it use a plural term? Lamed al Bechor, Umaiser, Upesach, these three go together, Shehein Tu'unin, Matan Domim, that all of them have to be sprinkled on the Mizbeach, the blood, in the same way, Ve'emurin, Legabe Mizbeach, and Ve'emurin Legabe Mizbeach. and also the emurim, the parts that are brought in the mizbeach. So from here we learn out, we compare the Korban Pesach to the Bechor, and therefore it's done with a zrike like the Bechor. Minala on the tu'unin yisaid. How do you know that when you sprinkle it on the mizbeach, the blood has to land on a corner of the mizbeach where there's a foundation? Not on all sides of the mizbeach was there a foundation sticking out. I think it's only in Tzfainis and Maravis that there was a yisaid sticking out, so that's where it has to be poured on the mizbeach. You learn it out from what it says by the Korban Oila. Ksiv hacha as domam tizrek al mizbeach. And Ksiv Hasam, by the Korban Oila of the Talmud, it says, V'zork b'nei ha'aring ha'kainim is domi al mizbeach saviv. Ma Oila, so saviv refers to the yisaid. Ma Oila tu'una yisaid, just like over there, it has to be dafka on the yisaid. The Gemara will actually explain later, I think, how do you know it needs a yisaid? Okay, we'll see. Af Pesach nami ton yisaid. So too, but again to the Korban Pesach, there has to be the zrika on the foundation, right over here. Va'oila gufa minalon. From where do we know that the Korban Oila needs to have the blood go on the yisaid, on the foundation? On Makra, it says there clearly, el yisaid mizbach ha'oila. It has to go on the foundation of the Mizbeach. Alma, Oila, Tu'una, Yisaid. From there we learn out to the Korban Pesach that it also has to be poured, or not poured, the Zrik has to be done on the Yisaid.